Of abroad and global things. I got notes for this. It's the third annual Lost in Translation Stories of Global Experiences. This is part of the International Career Pathways event series, and it is sponsored by the School of Information, School of Social Work, College of Engineering, and the College of Elsinore. I think with that, we'll get started with our first speaker, who I have conveniently forgotten already. Not because he's insignificant, but because I've forgotten his name. Peter Cook, if you could please come up and get us started. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Peter Cook, and I don't know what I want to do with my life, and it feels good to admit that because I'm at a time in my college career where I'm a fifth-year student, and you're supposed to be thinking about resumes and networking and just careers in general, and it's really daunting. So it feels good to admit that I honestly have no idea what I'm doing. But I am glad that I'm a geology student here, and last summer I went to Italy to study geology in a little town called Sorrento outside of Naples, and I had the idea in mind that I was going to take a volcanology class. I was going to get some really reputable field work in, and I was also going to take a creative writing class just for fun. So I was going to get some good field work that I could put on my resume, and I could also get some creative writing stories for my personal portfolio. So I had like a really productive summer in mind. But when I got there, I found out really quickly that that was not going to be the case. The volcanology class actually turned out to be an archaeology class, and if you don't know, those two things are completely different, and it doesn't really work for my field of work. And I was literally the only student in the creative writing class, so I was just, for 6 weeks, me and the professor staring each other in the face. So it wasn't really a creative or a collaborative writing environment. So I decided really quickly that if I wasn't going to get anything done, which I didn't, I would have to make use of my time there, because I didn't want it just to be a 6-week-long vacation. So I decided I would go out on the weekends, try and take trips and make it adventurous. And one weekend, some classmates and I, we decided to spend the weekend in a town outside of Syracuse, which is on the island of Sicily. But before I would meet them, I decided that as long as I'm on Sicily, I might as well quick stop over to one of the world's largest active volcanoes and hike up it real quick, and then I'll go meet them the next day. So I took a boat to Catania, and that's at the base of Mount Etna, and I got a moped with my mountaineering backpack, which is way too top-heavy for a moped at any speed, and I set off for Mount Etna. And when I got there, I got to the little sort of like ski village. I mean, no one skis on it, but you can picture it. It's got the gift shop, the restaurant, so on and so forth. And I looked up at it, and the mountain really did not seem that high. I figured I might have just gained a lot of elevation while I was riding there. So I saw the cable car go up, and I thought, I'm a macho geologist. I don't take no cable cars, so I might as well hike up it, and then I'll take the cable car back down. So I didn't buy any food, and I didn't take any extra water with me, so I was pretty ambitious, I guess you could say. And so I start hiking up it. And the hiking is really hard because there's a lot of volcanic ash on the side, and it's kind of like walking through quicksand, more or less. You take one step and you sink down. So by the time I got towards the top, I was taking about 2 steps before I had to take like a 5-minute break, and it was just very, very exhausting. So on my way up, I was thinking I'm going to get a cappuccino, I'm going to get whatever at the restaurant, I'm going to use the bathroom, and I'm going to take the cable car ride back down. So finally, when I get my feet on flat ground, I see the cable in the chairlift just creak to a halt. And it turns out that the cable car actually stops running at 5 o'clock, right when I arrived. I looked and the restaurant was closed. Even the bathroom was closed for some reason. And I was kind of considering just laying down and rolling back down the side of the mountain, because I think that would be easier than hiking back down. And also, I looked and I saw another cable car going up higher, and I hadn't even reached the top. I got to the highest point that I could see from the base, so I was not even close to the top. So thankfully there was a cable car worker still there, and so I made his puppy dog face, and thankfully he gave me a ride back down. So I completely failed to hike Mount Etna, and so I was thinking, I failed to hike Mount Etna. I can't even say I did that, and I don't have anything to put on my resume other than the fact that I happened to have a nice paid vacation in Italy. And so I was really down on myself, but then I thought I had all these adventures and experiences that I can't really, I could tell people about it, but I could write about it, but I can't really put them on a resume or list them as bullet points or skills or anything like that. And again, this is a time in my life where resumes are really important, supposedly, and so I don't like the idea of a resume because there's supposed to be a person there, and they're just bullet point skills and qualifications, but there's so much more in between those bullet points that don't show up on paper. But if you accumulate those experiences, people can tell. They can tell how you carry yourself, how you speak with other people, and they definitely stick with you. And I feel like that's what I got out of my trip, and hope you guys keep that in mind when filling out your resume too. So thank you very much.
Let's give another hand up. That was great, thank you. So I forgot to introduce myself. I'll be your MC tonight. My name is Sal. At the top of the programs, there's a little bio about me, and I didn't realize that when I was explaining myself, I would, what I said was actually going to happen and go into the bio. So there's a little blurb about where I studied abroad, and it's called Bilbao. The city's called Bilbao. It's in northern region of Spain, in the Basque region. And growing up, I took a couple of Spanish classes, and I learned two things in them. Number one, that chicharrones are pork rinds in Spanish, and number two, that somewhere in Spain there's this city called Bilbao, and it's equivalent to the Pittsburgh of Spain. So those are the two things I learned, and then went to college, and it turned out that I was going to study abroad there. So don't know how that happened, but it did. So, oh, excellent. We've got two mini slips. Remember, if you need a pen, we've got pens, so just ask for one, and then send these to the end of the aisle. We'll collect them, and then I'll read them. So, number one, the thing I missed, or did not miss, most about America while abroad was ice in my drinks and Mexican food. Ice in, I don't know how many of you know that, but ice is like non-existent outside of America. I don't understand why, but it's just, you can't find it. I'm not gonna lie, I came up with this idea for a mini slip because I wanted to share my own, and that is that I missed proper sized beds. As a 6'2" male, I don't think there's a place in the world that has a bed that fits me except for America. When I studied abroad, I stayed with a host family, and their bed was about suitable for a 5'5" person, so I ended up wedging my suitcase at the foot of my bed so that my feet could extend over it and be supported. So I missed a bed. Mini slip number two. I'm better at physical humor while trying to speak in a different language. I'm not as good at sarcasm in a different language. Very fine line between sarcasm and just being mean. Alright, so with that, our next storyteller is Brandon Patterson. So please come on up.
I was partially raised by my grandparents, which means all-you-can-eat popcorn and hard candy. And another thing, because of my grandmother and her deep passion for Christianity, we also had Bible-themed birthday parties. So while my friends were having the Lion King birthday party, I had the Lamb and the Lion party. Instead of pinning the tail on Simba, we played Pin the Lamb next to the sleeping lion. Fun times. During these birthdays, we'd also watch the Living Scriptures, which were cartoon versions of Bible stories. And I watched enough of these that I eventually got a favorite. That was the story of the Prodigal Son. And the Prodigal Son is the story of a father who has two sons, the older of which is a very loyal son to his father, and the second of which is a more rebellious son who ends up taking his father's riches to another country, is very riotous in his wastefulness, and eventually does return back to his father. Now, since I was partially raised by my grandparents, I didn't really have a father, but I had a grandfather, and I often thought, well, which son would I be to my grandfather? And I mean, I was nice to him if he let me watch the old sci-fi movies and stay up past my bedtime. So I thought that I was much like the loyal, the good son. But it seemed I would hearken to that of the rebellious son sooner or later. After my undergraduate experience, I traveled to a mountainous region of central Taiwan, and that's where I met a man named Thomas. Thomas was a language exchange that I had to learn Chinese, and I met him through my roommate, and he's a retired gentleman. He was in his late 50s, very fit for his age. He was very enthusiastic about learning English. I remember when first going over to his house, he gave me slippers for my feet, said slippers, took me over to his coffee table, said table. We had these little stools next to the coffee table. Stools. Thank you. I sat down, and his wife immediately came through the kitchen door and brought out this wonderful soup. She placed it down on the table. I looked at it. I didn't know a single ingredient in there. I kind of was very hesitant to try it. Thomas, seeing my hesitation, immediately brought the bowl up to his face, gave me a big smile. Good, good. All right, so I tasted that soup, and you know what? I love that soup. And I would keep going back to Thomas's. I go there twice a week, mostly for his company, but also the food was very awesome as well from his wife. And eventually those 2 days of language exchange turned into just friendship. And Thomas would invite me on bicycle rides around Taiwan, and we'd go through abandoned train tunnels that were converted into bicycle paths. I remember going past morning markets where mothers would be getting the food for their families for that day. And I really felt great about Thomas, and he was really kind to me, and eventually he actually started calling me his American son, and I called him Taiwan father. And I taught his son in one of my English classes that I was teaching there. And became really close with his two daughters, and I actually adopted his name. So in Taiwan, you're given a Chinese name if you'd like, and so I got his name of Hu. So my last name was Brandon Hu was my family name, which Hu is actually the first name over there, so it'd be Hu Brandon. And Hu me, yeah. And so, yeah, so eventually, the 6 months were up, and it was time for me to get a new visa if I wanted to continue my teaching there, and so I desired that. So the nearest location to go was Bangkok, Thailand, and even though I told everyone I was just going over to Bangkok, coming back right afterwards, I actually decided to go on a bit of an adventure, and I took the inspiration of Thomas and my bicycle rides and decided to cycle across Southeast Asia for 6 weeks and not tell anyone and just kind of go. And so I did, and I started in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, which is the southern part of Vietnam. I went up through Laos, Savanakhet, down to Cambodia in Phnom Penh, and then ended in that place, which is Bangkok. And so during this journey, I fell in love with Southeast Asia. I saw miles and miles and miles and miles and miles, miles of rice fields, more than you'd ever want to see. I saw a buffalo that would carry machinery to till these rice fields. I saw butterflies in the distance that were kind of leading me along this journey on my bike. And I saw children waving and saying, Savaidi, which in Thai and different languages is hello. And just felt so much warmth by these people. And the story isn't all about Sabaidis and butterflies. Eventually, I did liken unto that younger of the two sons and became a little bit more riotous in my actions. When I got to Bangkok, Bangkok's an interesting place. It kind of just takes you, and I became very self-serving and forgot actually a lot about who I was, why I came there. I stopped remembering that I had student loans to pay for back home, and eventually came to a moment where it was actually in the daytime, and it was the heat of the sun laid upon my cheek, and I thought about the love that I had from Thomas and others, and eventually that led me to do what I saw in the Living Scripture movies, which was lay on my knees and pray and ask, what should I do? Because I'm sort of lost and I'm likened to that second son. And I got this answer to return home. And so immediately, not immediately, but several days later, I found a flight to go back to Taiwan. And I saw my Taiwan father, and he came and greeted me and said, Brandon, I thought I should come to you. Mama Hoo-Hoo was so worried. And Mama Hoo-Hoo was my nickname that I gave to his wife, because their last name's Hu, Mama Hoo-Hoo. And so he comforted me in that, and I told him that I was sorry I didn't tell him about me going on this 6-week bike ride, but I did make it back, and I just wanted to give you my regards before I did head home to the US eventually. And to this day, I'm keeping in contact with Thomas. He's a good friend of mine, and I'm always trying to be that good American son to my Taiwan father. Thank you.
The Prodigal Son is something that my family has once told me about because I am one of 4 children, and I have 3 sisters. So I'm the only boy, so everything returns to me as the only son. And I have since graduated from the University of Michigan, and when I go home, I have a very, very loving Italian grandma who, even after graduating, still asks me, but why Michigan? Because I'm from Chicago, so I don't know if I told you that, but I'm from Chicago. And so she goes, but there's so many good schools within a half hour, why Michigan? So sometimes even returning to home isn't good enough. Mini slip. The thing I missed, or did not miss, most about America while abroad was easy access to English language books. Anything about trying to find English language books abroad. I am better at improvising in a different language. I'm not as good at making sense in a different language. Well, improvising is not really much about making sense now, is it? Some people travel for love. Some people travel for food. I travel for the airplane ride. Are you short? Because the airplane ride is the worst part. I don't mean that in a bad way, just it's not fun to be tall sometimes. I'm better at talking myself out of a traffic violation in a different language. How many times did that come up that you know you're good at that? Not as good at buying lunch meat. You know, grams or kilos in a different language. Thank you for those. Hang on to these, and I'll read these when we return. Now? Read them now? Okay, I'll read them now. Number 2, fill out your mini slips. All right, number 1. Context, Oaxaca, Mexico. The best food from my travel, the best food items from my travels are memelitas, small tortillas topped with a bean paste, queso fresco, diced tomatoes, and salsa verde roja, or tamales every Sunday with our host family. Get your diced tomatoes. The thing I missed or did not miss most about America while abroad was meat that was not ham. Did you miss it or did you not miss it? I don't know where this is going, but I think you like ham? I don't know. All right, so we'll be coming back in 15. Yep, 15 minutes, get your coffee and some snacks. All right. Experiencing nature and love and food. Because they're just too good not to. The thing I missed most, or did not miss most about America while abroad was English currency, i.e. my sense of how expensive or inexpensive things were. True, very true. At a department store, for context, I thought I asked for pens, but what I really asked for was pants, i.e. underpants. And there's no way you can write with those. So this event is called Lost in Translation, and I love that title because I think that when someone finds themselves in a situation where they have no control of what's going on and they find themselves lost in translation or in physical space, it presents an opportunity for that person to really find out a lot about themselves and about the kindness or ill-heartedness of other people in some poor cases. But there are some times where you're not necessarily lost in translation, but you found a way to be connected with someone entirely without speaking. And I once found myself in that situation, and that was through soccer, because soccer is one of the most widely played sports in the world, and it requires very little. It requires a single ball and a flat surface, and not even that to play. So I traveled to Italy with my family because I'm half Italian and my dad's entire family still lives in Italy, basically. And we traveled to a small island off of Sicily. I don't remember it. It was like when I was in 6th grade, so it's kind of hazy. But they have this thing in Italy where after you eat, you can't go swimming for 30 minutes because the sharks will get you, which I'm now realizing is just something my parents told me so that they wouldn't have to deal with me swimming. But when I was in Italy, I was sitting at the dinner table just really upset that I couldn't go swimming because Sicily, the weather is beautiful. It's like mid-70s and the water is like just beautiful and blue, and so all I wanted to do was go in the water. So I was sitting at this dinner table and I was just like really upset. And then I'd like to call it basically a Coca-Cola commercial happened to me. So I was wearing a soccer jersey and there was like a scuba shop next door, and they had like 2 little boys outside were playing with their soccer jerseys on, and they were playing with like a little ball. And so I was like begging my parents that if I could just go play with them. And so I didn't speak any Italian and they didn't speak any English. But we communicated the fact that I wanted to play soccer with them. So we started to play soccer in like this like little street kind of alley area, and it was like beautiful, and I was loving it. And then they were like, hey, we know another field, do you want to go play? And so I told my parents I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go play with them. And my parents were like totally fine with it, let me go. So we like walked down a couple more streets, and all of a sudden we opened up into this courtyard, and in the courtyard there's an AstroTurf field with like plexiglass walls surrounding it. And this is not exactly like a rich island. It's kind of run down in some places, but this field is one of the nicest fields I've ever seen, and it's just in the middle. So these houses, like, they're not houses, but they're apartment complexes, and they're old. And it's like, this thing is like brand new. It's got to be like 2 or 3 years old. So it was just unbelievable. And we started playing, and then like the rival team, like another group of kids just come out from the apartments, and we start playing this game. You know, I have no idea what they're saying, but it's pretty obvious what they're saying because they're just asking for the ball. So I played with them, and then they were on the apartment complexes surrounding it. It was just like a square. People started to come out onto their balconies, and like this is again the Coca-Cola thing. Like people were watching, and I could just keep hearing people saying Americano, Americano, and they're just like watching me play, and well, not just me, but like everyone. And it was just this magical moment where I found myself completely. I was in a space where I had no idea what was being said to me, but I knew exactly what was going on, and I felt totally comfortable. And I feel like that doesn't get brought up enough when you're talking about being abroad and finding experiences. So the only bad part was when the game ended, and I was walking around the town with these guys. My parents saw me in the middle of the street and came running at me. And apparently I didn't tell them that I was going to leave their sight, and so they alerted the local authorities that I had gone missing. So all good things do come to an end. But not this event, because we have another speaker coming up. Denise Kozakowski, right? Close enough.
So this past summer, I co-led a U of M study abroad with wonderful students deep into the Amazon rainforest of eastern Ecuador. I love to travel, to explore new cultures, but I had never been to Ecuador, I'd never been to a jungle, and I had no knowledge of tropical ecology. What was I doing leading this group into the rainforest? I really couldn't give you a good answer. And I found myself waffling back and forth, fear, excitement, fear, excitement. My co-leader and I, we did our best to prepare. Fully stocked first aid kit, we took care of the medication for a diabetic student, and if worse came to worse, we had a medical evacuation plan. And so every time my mind started to go to the venomous spiders and snakes, I would think, it's okay, we have a medical evacuation. And so everything is good. We planned this trip for 10 months, and a 10-hour trip from Quito deep into the rainforest by plane, bus, and 2 canoes. And eventually we are transported to the most remote, exquisite, and challenging place I'd ever been in my life. And once we were there was no turning back. We were stuck in the rainforest. And we watched day by day as the rainforest undid what our fast-paced, gold-driven society does. It forced us to slow down. We had to learn to walk slowly, to look carefully, to listen deeply. And eventually we were rewarded with astonishing beauty. We were awoken every morning with the haunting, percussive growls of the howler monkeys. Blue morpho butterflies would flutter along our paths. Jungle sunsets where you're standing high above the canopy and you can see this vast distance of pristine forest. It was amazing, but it was also really challenging. We were constantly wet. Our things were always damp. We smelled. We watched as mold grew on our sneakers and our backpacks right before our eyes. But even so, the challenges and the beauty, we were all being transformed, and I was in awe of the jungle. There was a small part of me, though, as the days were coming to an end, that was ready to go. And just a few days before the trip would end, one of our students was injured. Not by a poisonous snake or a venomous spider, by soccer. He had been playing a game of soccer with the station staff. He slipped on some gravel, landed in some concrete, and he ripped a 4x3 patch of skin off of his shin. And it took all of my courage as I was walking up to look at it to not show what I was really feeling. As I looked down and saw muscle, ligament, tendon, I just couldn't believe he was so exposed and vulnerable to the microbes of the jungle, and I wanted him medevaced right away. Our emergency first aid kit, it was useless because we had gone through all of the supplies. And that medevac, it wasn't even possible. In order to order a medevac, we would have had to monitor the weather for several days. We would have had to transport the student from the station downriver back into a jungle with a trail that had not been maintained. We would have to deal with a tangled up helipad, build a fire, send out a smoke signal, and wait for the helicopter to find us. In the end, we had to take care of him, and 16 hours later, we were able to get him to an emergency oil clinic where we hoped he would be evacuated from that spot. But no, 30 stitches later, he came back to the jungle, and we had to take care of him for several days before we were able to leave. Eventually, we made it back to Quito. The student's fine. He sent me an email today. He's in a grad program. He's doing really well, so he's okay. But he was admitted right away into a hospital and started on IV antibiotics for a staph infection. And so as his illness was healing in the hospital and our trip was coming to an end, my family arrived, and we were going to leave to go to the Galapagos. And we did. We had a fantastic trip. And 10 minutes before we were going to catch the last ferry off the island to get on the plane, I got a little distracted and started taking photos of a pelican that was diving in this beautiful crystal blue water. And I slipped on a concrete algae-covered dock. And I had a deep gash in my elbow filled with Galapagos crud. My mind is just playing through, oh my God, I can't believe this. And like my student, 10 hours later, I'm in the same ER in Quito. I recognize the same guy who gave me the Wi-Fi password before and said hello to him, and I'm getting 8 stitches in my elbow. 2 days later, I'm back on a plane, back in DTW, middle of the night, heading to the U of M ER, and they admit me right away and start me on IV antibiotics for a staph infection. So, why did I do all this? What made me think that I could take a group of students to a place I knew nothing about? And I guess the best answer is that somewhere over the last 18 years that I've been raising my children, I had somehow forgotten how to be alone, completely self-efficient, independent, and I felt a longing to rediscover that part of myself. Maybe this was a way for me to face some of the things that I fear: injury, needing health care in remote places, not being able to get it right away. Maybe all of this was training for the really big thing out there that I fear: my own children leaving for college, going on study abroads, having their own life adventures. So, as I reflect back on this, I realized that I had a little practice this summer facing things that I fear, and I think it's all going to be okay.
Mini slip time. Let's see. I thought I asked for cheese, but what I actually asked for was cheese, because everyone spoke English there. I gotcha. I thought I asked for goat cheese, but what I actually asked for was goats. I'm not sure if that actually happened or someone was just playing with my mind. This one doesn't have to do with cheese, I'm just telling you now. I thought I asked for photography lessons, but what I actually asked for was pornography lessons. Moving on. The best custom from my travels is more like a habit that I noticed. people in the Philippines raised one eyebrow if they didn't agree with my idea, but raised both eyebrows if they liked my ideas. That could be very misleading if you cannot see both eyebrows. Also interesting. I thought I asked for a tampon, but what I actually asked for was a diaper. I don't have experience, but isn't it more or less the same? I would like to share the best thing that I ever took away from a travel are plantains. So I went to Panama once and I had fried plantains. It was the first time I've ever had them. And they are just like far superior to any French fry I've ever had. And they look like bananas for those of you who don't know what plantains are. They're very similar in shape and color to bananas, but they taste totally different. They're like steak fries if you ever had those. So just letting you know, plantains are the way to go. So we do have a little bit of extra time tonight. If anyone is feeling ambitious and would like to share their own story, you can come talk with any of people in the back or myself if you'd like to share, or just come on up next time I'm up here speaking. Just interrupt me and start your story. I won't be offended. But we do have a planned story, and that is from Isar Buendia.
My family's from Ecuador, and I've been taken off with them, so awesome. Hi. So I'm in Mandalay, the capital of Myanmar, and I'm in this temple surrounded by around 2,000 marble slates, 6 feet tall, and they have inscription on each of them from Buddhist teachings. It's not the first temple I see, actually. I already had been traveling for 2 months, going to 8 countries. On this trip that I called my spontaneous adventures backpacking in Southeast Asia before going to grad school and having no more life type thing. I went with one of my best friends, Caleb. We bought a one-way ticket. I had a small bag, 2 shirts, 2 pants, 1 pair of shoes, a sweater, an iPhone. That's all. No itinerary, no travel book, no reservations. And so far, 2 months later, we were surviving. I thought it was pretty cool. It was pretty adventurous, I thought. So I'm there in this temple, and I bump into this guy who happens to be from America. Yeah, another American guy. And he's from LA. He's a teacher, school teacher. And we end up just start talking, we're sharing stories. We end up hiking to this mountain where we see the city of Mandalay right at sunset. And we're sitting there just enjoying the beautiful weather, the breeze, looking at the sunset, and we're sharing stories. And then he tells us, you know guys, one cannot have a memorable experience unless one takes a risk. And he goes on and shares this incredible story that he had. And I was inspired. I mean, I felt like I was not adventurous. So we ate something afterwards and we left. And the next morning, my friend and I flew to our next destination, Bangladesh, with that in mind. So we get there, Dhaka, get out of the airport. I don't want to take a taxi, it's too overpriced, because we're tourists. So I go outside and somehow we find the local bus through sign language. And we're going towards a direction that hopefully has a hotel or a hostel or something. I don't really know because I don't have a guidebook or anything. So we're just there, taking it one minute at a time. So we're sitting there and I see this guy in front of me and he's reading in English. I'm like, whoa, he's Bengali. And I'm like, okay, this is so cool. I'm a friendly guy, so I'm like, dude, hi, I'm Isar, we're traveling around, what are you studying? So this guy, his name is Shahrukh, and he is studying for his job, studying more advanced accounting job, getting better in his accounting, I believe. And we just share for a little bit, and then he just turns around, and we turn around, and we just go our own ways in a little seat in the bus. And then randomly, he just turns around and says, dude, I have this crazy idea. What if you guys come with me? I'll take you to the jungle of Bangladesh. I know this is crazy, but think about it. And he turns around. And I'm like, whoa, okay, what do I do? I'm like, this is crazy. I just met this guy. And then the thought of the teacher came to my mind. I'm like, if I don't take a risk, sometimes I can get a memorable experience. I'm like, let's do it. My friend's like, are you sure? I'm like, I initiated the conversation, let's do it. Okay. So we ended up going to his apartment, meeting one of his friends, convincing him to go with us. We booked an overnight bus to Bandarban, which is the least populated, most remote area of Bangladesh, which I found out later. So we started the adventure, per se. And the first thing is the bus. The bus, 50% of the time, you're in midair. The trail is dangerously bumpy. I mean, it was hilarious to try to be like 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning, you're sleeping all of a sudden, you feel yourself flying in the air and you open your eyes and all the passengers are just like in midair. I'm like, oh, this is funny, and then you fall back, ouch, that hurts. But we survived. We get there, we're almost at the city or the town really, and then we get stopped. The security guards get on board and they make my friend and I get out, and then they start arguing in Bengali with these two other new friends, I guess, right? And we find out that since it's a very remote area, we need permits as foreigners. So like, what do we do? In the middle of nowhere, we can't just go back on another overnight bus. So Sharuk is like, give me your passports. I'm gonna go into town and figure it out. So here I am, my friend and I, in the middle of nowhere on the side, in a little shack with 2 National Guards without passports. And it's almost noon and we're really hungry. So, we have to be patient, So a couple hours later, thankfully, Sharu comes in a little taxi, I think it was, smiling like, permits. It's like, yes, okay. So we go into town, and I have one of the most incredible experiences. We end up hiking, and I get bitten alive by mosquitoes, like freaking out, thinking I'm gonna get malaria. Next time by repellent. We end up going further into the jungle on a 3-hour bus ride, like making really fast, sharp turns. I thought the bus was gonna fall over. But we get there and it's beautiful. We challenge an old man who doesn't even speak English to a push-up contest. Up in the mountain, really cold, and it was raining. We ended up swimming in a river during a monsoon rainstorm. Just there swimming with other locals who are taking showers or washing their clothes. To even other things like several cultural misunderstandings between us, because we all 4 of us were in one little room, 2 beds. So the last night, we're waiting for our overnight bus, again, back to the capital. And my friend and I are mentally exhausted. It was a culture just stretch for us, totally different. But as I sat there in the little waiting room watching Bollywood on the screen, maybe it was translating to Bengali, I don't know, it was Bollywood, really loud, and just waiting there, I realized that this was one of the most memorable and authentic experiences I was having that none of the past month I'd offered. And I thought, reflect now, I realized it's one of the most memorable things I won't ever forget. And I think back at what this teacher said, it's so true. It's because of that risk that I create a memory or an experience that will stay with me forever. Will you take the risk?
So, do we have anyone who wants to tell a story on the spot? Any takers? No, I'll just go read some slips then. Our first travel. T. Taiwan girls are hot. Reason to travel. Meet the new myself. Ann Arbor is pretty adorable because of the storytelling events. Various tickets and postcards are where my memory of traveling stores. Enjoying awesome food is the most important reason I travel. Lost in Transition are good names for both the film and tonight's story, so translation. Okay, next one. Same thing. Someone just wrote a story, okay. Go ahead and read it. I sat at a bench in the Garden of Venice, 2012. So exhausted, then an Italian old lady came and sat next to me. She saw I was exhausted and started talking Italian to me. I talked English, she talked Italian, but we can understand each other. For a whole afternoon, she lightened up my day. Old ladies have a tendency to do that, don't they? I thought I asked for a snack from my student, but what I actually asked for was unidentified meat. Do we have a meat-friendly crowd tonight? Because it's come up a few times. So unfortunately, our next speaker couldn't be here tonight. David Turnley couldn't make it. So we're gonna go straight to Densu Dixon as our next speaker.
How's it going, guys? So my story starts out with me on a train in Berlin. And it's one of those really nice trains with this really nice carpet. And it's not divided into seats, it's divided into rooms. So every 4 people sits in a room, right? And it's got really nice drapes and a table in between. So I'm sitting in one of these rooms by myself, and a man walks in. He's a really tall guy with this kind of cheesy all-gray sweatsuit. And he's carrying this foam cup, you know, like the white foam cups that you drink coffee out of? He's carrying one, he's sipping it, he sits down across from me, and at first it's a little uncomfortable. You know, you make awkward eye contact and whatnot, it's just kind of silent. But after a couple minutes, he looks at me and he goes, you want some? You want some? And I'm like, yeah, sure. What is it? It was vodka. It's 7 p.m. and this man is drinking straight vodka out of a coffee cup, a foam coffee cup. I'm like, no, thank you, I'm cool. But just this interaction was enough to kind of get some conversation flowing. And so we talk, and I explained to him, you know, I had spent 3 months in Warsaw teaching English. I was in Berlin for the weekend, just kind of vacationing around, and I was on this train on my way back to Warsaw. And he's explaining to me that he was from Lithuania, which is a small country kind of next to Poland. And he had spent 6 months on a fishing boat and was on his way back to Lithuania to see his family. And if you can imagine a guy that spent 6 months on a fishing boat, it was this guy, 100%, no questions asked. And at first I was kind of intimidated by him, just because he was wearing a sweatsuit, drinking vodka at 7 p.m. But we actually really connected. We kind of, you know, we got some conversation flowing. And I felt like we were like friends, you know? We talked for a good hour and a half. But after a while, the conversation died, and I drifted off to sleep. And the first thing I remember being woken up by was this kind of deep, impatient, nasally voice. I hear, Bilet. So I wake up. First thing I notice, the train stopped. It's dark outside. I've been sleeping for a couple hours. And I look to the right, and there's this kind of plump Polish lady with this red shirt on that all the train employees wear. She's got her hand out. She's saying bilet, which is ticket in Polish. And the way these trains work is you buy your ticket ahead of time, and then you get on the train, you ride it for a couple hours, and a ticket person comes in and checks your tickets. That's what was going on. So I was like, no problem. Reached in my bag, got my ticket, handed it to her, and she takes my ticket, looks at it, looks at me, looks at it, looks at me, and then just automatically starts yelling at me in Polish. And so I give her this look like, do I look like I speak Polish to you? Right? Which is, by itself is interesting, because there's like maybe 3 or 4 black people on the planet that speak Polish. So I don't know what she thought the odds were. But I give her this face, and then she automatically switches to yelling at me in English, right? And from what I could decipher, I had purchased the wrong type of ticket, right? And so I'm like, look, hey, relax, you know, let me talk to the conductor, I'll purchase the right type of ticket, no problem. But she's not having it. She goes, get off train, now, get off train. And you guys gotta understand, my flight back to the United States took off from Warsaw that next morning. I needed to be on this train, I needed to get back home. And my Lithuanian friend who I'd been talking to, he knew that. And so, you know, I look over at him, and he stands his tall self up, and then gets in between, stands between me and this lady, and he starts yelling at her. And he's like, you can't kick him off this train, he's just a stupid American boy. Look at him, he'll get knocked out here, right? And the entire time that he's talking to this lady is just, get off train, don't care, get off train, don't care. And this conversation ends with her grabbing my bags and grabbing me by the collar of my shirt and dragging me through the train to the nearest exit and kicking me off. Okay, and before I go on to this next part, you guys gotta understand something. I was extremely desperate in this situation, okay? I had paid for most of this trip myself. If I didn't get on this flight back to the United States, I would have been stranded in Poland, so I could have gotten enough money to buy another ticket. Right, so I was stranded. I didn't want to be stranded in Poland without a job or a place to stay. I was desperate. Just understand I was desperate. Okay? So while this lady is kind of distracted, talking to one of the other employees about what's happened, I kind of sneak around to another entrance of the train where there's no employees, and I hop in. So I'm on the train again, and I take my bags and I go down the hallway and I find this dark room. I open the dark room, there's a guy sleeping in there, put my stuff down, close the door, close the drapes, turn off the lights, and I sit down. My plan was, I'm gonna wait in this train until it starts moving, and then I'm gonna hide in the bathroom until we get to Warsaw. That was my plan. But we had a problem, this lady noticed me out of the corner of her eye. I'd get back on the train. And I could hear her coming from like 30 feet away. And I could hear her feet stomping. I could hear exactly what she was doing. She was stopping, go to a door, open it up, look for me, slam it shut. Go to the next door, open it up, look for me, slam it shut. And I could hear her getting closer and closer, and I was shaking, and then finally she gets to my door, and she opens it up, looks inside, doesn't see me because the lights are turned off, I guess, and slams it shut. And as soon as the door slams shut, I have my phone in my hand, and I get a call from a Polish friend. And the phone, it doesn't ring or vibrate or anything. It's just the screen of the phone turned on. There was a flash of light. And I guess she saw it out of the corner of the door, because she turned right back around, opened that door. And, I thought that the yelling was bad the first time. Oh no, there's nothing. She comes in and she, again, grabs me by my collar, grabs my bags, and is just screaming at the top of her lungs in this kind of mix of Polish and English, so I didn't really know what she was saying. But I guess it didn't really matter at this point, because I knew, main points, get off the train. And so she's dragging me down this hallway, screaming at the top of her lungs with no gaps in breath or anything. And throws me off, and she throws me off, and I'm outside, and I'm like, please, lady, this is my last chance to get back home, please. But basically, she says, if you say another word, I'm calling the police. So it's like, all right, whatever. And so I'm sitting there, just kind of hopeless, and watching the train go by. And she's woken up the entire train. It's late at night. She woke up the entire train. So as I'm standing there, people are looking out their drapes in the windows as the train is going by. I'm looking back at them, and they're looking at me. And I watch the train go, right? And so, at this point, I hadn't yet given up. I was like, I'm not going to give up, right? I grab my bags, I turn around, and I walk about 50 feet to the train common area, right, where people wait for their trains and whatnot. So I walk inside, and the first thing I notice when I walk inside is that people are kind of looking at me, right? They're kind of looking at me, staring at me. And I was like, okay. But I kind of understood after a while. In Warsaw, which is where I spent most of my time in Poland, it's, mostly white Catholics, right? So when they see a black person, it's like people come up and say, oh wow, like ask questions and things like that. But in very small Polish cities, they don't get tourism, so they never see black people except on TV, right? And so when I walk in, I'm like a unicorn or like a celebrity. People just glaring at me. But it was like, no problem. But that's how I knew that I was in the middle of nowhere, the absolute middle of nowhere. So I sit down and I get my laptop on, and for about half an hour, I'm typing away, trying to figure out a way to get home. So I look at trains, buses, and walking literally any way I can get to Warsaw in the time to get my flight. And after about a half an hour of searching, I kind of figure out that there's no way I can possibly make my flight on time without driving. And once this sets in, and once I realize I'm not going to be able to see my family for another month or so, this is a really bad situation, I start to tear up a little bit. And so while I'm kind of about to break down, right, there was this guy across from me, sitting across from me, and he's looking at me, and I'm pretending not to notice. Obama. Obama. And I'm like, yeah, what? Like, yeah? And he's like, you like soccer? Yes, you like soccer? And I'm like, yeah. And so he has the final World Cup. The final World Cup game is going on right then. I completely forgot because I was been traveling or whatever. And he has it up on his laptop. And he's like, oh, come here. And so I go over there and I sit next to him and he puts his arm around me and he's nudging me and stuff. And after a while, 3 or 4 other people come around and they're surrounding me. We're all watching this game together and people can tell by my face, I'm not having the best day ever. And so they're shaking me and stuff. It got me cheering along with them. And that experience by itself was kind of surreal because this is probably one of the worst things that has ever happened to me in my life, right? My world was literally crumbling around me. But for this hour and a half that these people were around me, had me cheering along to the game, it was like nothing was wrong, right? And that was amazing. It was a great memory. But after that, eventually people went on their respective trains. The game ended, and I was alone again. At this point, it was 1 in the morning, and my flight took off at 4:30 in the morning from the city. So I'd given up, right? And I needed a place to stay. So my plan was I'm going to call my friend. But my phone wasn't working, so I got up and I went over to the nearest person. And I was like, hey, can I borrow your phone? Is that okay? He's like, oh, yeah. And so he hands me his phone. And the first thing that I noticed when he's sending me the phone is that he's missing a few fingers. A lot of fingers. On this hand, he only has a middle finger and a thumb, so he's handing me the phone like that. All right, but I'm not like crazy, I'm not freaked out about it or anything. I'm just like, oh, this man's missing a few fingers, right? I grab his phone, I sit down next to him. I'm dialing on the phone, trying to figure my stuff out, and then while I'm doing that, I notice that my man is missing a few fingers on the other hand as well. On this hand, he only has a thumb and a pointer finger. And I'm like, okay, yeah. And then I notice also on his right foot, he's missing half of his right foot. He's wearing like a special boot and doesn't have any toes. At that point, I'm like, okay. I'm like, you know what I'm saying? I'm not like judging him or anything, I'm just a little uncomfortable. And so I'm like, whatever, I use his phone, and I call up my friend, and I was like, hey, this is the worst day of my life, they kicked me off the train, I'm not gonna be able to go home to see my family, I'm gonna need a place to stay for like a night or a month or so. And while I'm doing that, while I'm on the phone, this man next to me without the fingers, he's tapping me while I'm on the phone, with his finger trying to get my attention. I'm like, yeah, what's up? And I remember he had a really soft voice and kind of an intense look, and he looked at me and he says, I'll drive. And at first I was like, no, you obviously have a train to catch, I need to go all the way to Warsaw, there's no way I'm gonna have you drive me. And honestly, what was going through my mind was, how's this man gonna drive anything? 4.5 fingers. Can you ride a bike? What? Sorry. Anyway. I wouldn't recommend anyone at any point in their lives to get in the car with a person they just met at a train station without any fingers. Wouldn't suggest it to me. But at this point in my experience in my life, I was like, whatever, let's do it. Yeah. So I get in the car with this guy, and he drives me all the way to Warsaw to catch my flight. And one of my favorite memories from this entire trip was being in the car with him and listening to his life experiences and things like that. He's a dental assistant. He has 4 fingers. He's a dental assistant. Seriously, talk about inspirational, right? Amazing man. But he drives me 2.5 hours, misses his train to go catch my flight. And I make my flight by maybe 10 minutes. And so, when I get to the airport and I get out the car, and I'm like, wow, thank you. What can I do to repay you? Do you want money? I have money, blah, blah, blah. He's like, no. And he tells me, I don't exactly remember, word for word, but he basically says, think of the kindness that I've shown you and pass it on. Thank you.
Final mini slips. We got a lot of final mini slips here. All right. The best custom / food / article of clothing for my travels is watching neighbor launch fireworks from Beijing High River during Chinese New Year. That would have been awesome. Some travel for love, some travel for food. I travel for the love of meeting new people who are different from myself. The best custom / food / article of clothing for my travels is plantains. In all forms and at all meals. Amen. I'm better at scolding someone in a different language. I'm not as good at speaking super fast in a different language. So it's a slow scold. It burns deep. I'm better. I don't know what that says. Some travel for love, some travel for food. I travel for growth. I hope personality and not physical. It'd be interesting. Some travel for love, some travel for food. I travel for people. I thought I asked for eggplant, but what I actually asked for was shoes. And in what language are those two closely related? Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight, and I'd especially like to thank our storytellers. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you. I'd like to thank you, Joe, once again for the coffee. Looks like they're still there, so let's drink some more.
And let's have a round of applause for Sal, our wonderful MC. Hey, thanks everyone for coming. Feel free to grab some last snacks and things on your way out.